Throughout the decade plus I've spent working in financial planning, I've come to appreciate the fact that physicians are going to face unique challenges when it comes to getting their money right. If you think about it, as a physician, you sacrificed a decade plus developing yourself so you could serve others. And this sacrifice delayed your ability to generate income and ultimately save for your future compared to peers who didn't make that sacrifice. On top of that, more studies recently have shown that physicians are retiring earlier and earlier because of the burnout that's caused by hectic schedules, tedious bureaucracy, and stressful hours. Since time is your best friend when it comes to financial planning, this shorter window of time can create some additional pressure to make more optimal financial decisions. On top of that, the higher income levels earned by physicians typically makes retirement planning even more complicated and can also impact certain student loan repayment strategies. Finally, time wasn't the only thing you sacrificed to develop your craft. Typically, physicians that I work with are going to end up having a large amount of student loans, and that's going to come along with impacts on their budget. These unique challenges have led to a ton of different questions over the years. And typically, we start having these conversations by focusing on strategically repaying student loan debt. So in this video, we're going to discuss the different options and really lay out a high-level framework to help you as you start to figure out the right way to approach your student loan debt for your unique situation. Before we get started, a little bit of background. My name is Brian Walsh, and I lead the financial planning team here at Sofi. I am a certified financial planner, but nothing I talk about in today's video should be looked at like it's financial advice. Think about this more as high-level education or guidance. So before we start talking about specific strategies related to student loan debt, I think it's important to start with some basics so we all have a solid understanding. There are going to be two broad types of student loans: federal student loans and private student loans. Federal student loans are going to be loans taken directly from the government, and they're going to have some unique considerations. First off, there are limits on how much you can use for federal student loans to cover your education. Second, there's going to be some additional flexibility that comes with federal student loans for repayment options, such as income-driven repayment. Third, there's some additional considerations related to forgiveness plans that could be beneficial depending on your circumstances. Private student loans, on the other hand, are private loans taken from private lenders, and they're typically going to be used by borrowers after they max out federal student loans to fund the rest of their education. Private student loans aren't going to have the flexibility of income-driven repayment plan or the forgiveness that we discussed earlier with federal student loans. Student loan strategies can get relatively complicated, but at the end of the day, it should all start with asking yourself one relatively simple question. Do you want to minimize the amount that you pay right now or the amount that you pay over the long term? That simple question should really guide the core aspect of your approach to student loan debt. It also may change as your career progresses. Generally, when we start working with residents, they might be more likely to minimize the amount that they pay right now because their budget might not be able to handle standard repayments on their student loans. Generally speaking, as we start working with attendings and beyond, they might flip that a little bit and they start to focus on minimizing the amount that they pay over the long term, and they start attacking their student loan debt relatively aggressively in conjunction with all of their other goals. So let's talk about some potential options under each one of those paths. If your priority is to minimize the amount that you pay right now, you could explore some different options for both private student loans and federal student loans. With private student loans, you may explore refinancing options, so that way you could look to lower your interest rate and potentially extend your repayment period, which would ultimately lead to lower payments right now, but over the long term, a higher interest rate, which will cost you more. With federal student loans, the options, quite frankly, are much more complicated. You could explore different income-driven repayment options. Some of these are repay or revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan, pay, which is pay-as-you-earn repayment plan, IBR, which is income-based repayment plan, and ICR, which is income contingent repayment plan. At the end of the day, income-driven repayment plans are designed to set the amount to be affordable based on your income and your family size. Therefore, the specific details are going to vary on those factors, so it's important to research what those specific options are. On the other hand, if your priority is to minimize the amount that you pay over the life of the loan, you can explore some different options for both types of loans. With private student loans, you could explore refinancing, potentially looking to lower your interest rates or maybe shorten that repayment term, which would lead to higher payments now, but then over the life of the loan, less interest and lower cost. With federal student loans, you can consider, whether or not you plan to pursue PSLF based on, let's say, if you work at a 501c3, the amount of qualifying payments you've already made, and some other factors. You could also look at your specific repayment strategy to understand your options on how to aggressively pay that down. When I think about it working with physicians that are prioritizing how they can minimize the amount that they pay over the life of the loan, I'm typically going to be asked two different questions about refinancing and how aggressive should I actually be and what's appropriate. When it comes to the first one on refinancing, my answer to private student loans is relatively simple. Leverage soft credit pulls so that way you could understand exactly what rate you'd be eligible for, and then you can compare that to your existing rate. Then you may want to consider any potential fees, since honestly some lenders are going to charge fees. You could refinance your student loans multiple times, so it might be worth exploring your options even if you've refinanced your loans in the past, because you might be able to lower your rates, adjust your payments based on what you want to do. When it comes to federal student loans, the situation could be a little bit more complicated. If you refinance federal student loans, you lose federal benefits. So you're really going to need to understand how much you value those federal benefits before making this decision. The second part, when you're thinking about the ideal timeline, this is where it really depends on your circumstances. Generally, student loans are what we categorize as good debt because the interest rates are relatively low. There's always going to be exceptions, and there could be higher rate loans. So if we solely looked at the math, investing historically has had a higher rate of return than the interest rate that would be charged on a majority of student loans. But on the other hand, investing is going to come with risk. Student loans have a big emotional impact, and loan payments have a major impact on your overall budget, so it could make the difference between you having high expenses or relatively lower expenses once you pay off your student loans. Honestly, there is no one-size-fits-all answer related to how quickly you want to repay your student loans if you decide to go down the aggressive path. You're going to need to consider all the other critical aspects of your personal finances. In general, make sure that you protect your income through disability insurance, you protect your family through life insurance, you have enough cash set aside for emergencies, you're taking advantage of your employer match, and you're avoiding bad debt like credit card debt before getting extremely aggressive with your student loan repayment strategies. Those are all non-negotiable aspects of your personal finances. Once those are in place, then that's where you could look to figure out a timeline where you could aggressively pay down your student loans while still balancing out saving for the long-term goals such as retirement, so that way you can accomplish multiple things at one time. At the end of the day, there are going to be plenty of different options when it comes to student loans, and the unique challenges that you face in your profession can make this experience more complicated. I think that's why it's so important that you understand your options and you can make an educated and informed decision. Here at Sofi, I think we pride ourselves on giving you the tools and resources to do that. First, you could talk to a financial planner on my team free of charge to work through these different options. Second, you could explore your rates using a soft credit pull, so that way you could really understand what your unique options are. And then third, you could leverage a dedicated hotline, so that way you could ask your unique questions and get them answered without doing hours of research.